In this video we're going to be talking about Necron detachments. Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. In this video today we're going to be going through the 6 Necron detachments, what I think about them, the good points, the bad points, the good, the bad, the ugly, and I'm going to be ranking them as well. Just add a little bit of something different to this video. Yeah, I think ranking them and then discussing them is probably the way to go in this discussion video. Before we do, of course, we're going to talk about our sponsor, which is the Baron of Dice. So head on over to the Baron of Dice website using my link in the description down below. Get onto their homepage. What I like to do is click Sci-Fi and click Xenos, of course, because we are Necrons. Cool little images there. Scroll down to Slumbering Machines and there's a number of Necron style dice. I've already showcased this one a few times. They have the dead, the nice green and yellow tint. I have showed the scarab ones as well. They are pretty cool. They're translucent with a bit of blue and green in there. But this is another cool one, these green coffin looking ones. Charcoal black. And yeah, you can get these using my discount code PLANET40k. You can get them in 25s, you can get them in 50s. You can choose what kind of corners you want, squares or rounded. If you want mini dice you can as well. But yeah, head on over to the Baron of Dice. Use my discount code, the link is down in the description down below and there's free shipping on your first order. So big shout out to the Baron of Dice there. Make sure you are getting hold of your dice and using that discount code PLANET40k. Right, let's talk about the detachments then. We've got the 6 detachments, 5 of course are within the codex and then 1 we got at Christmas, which is the Star-shatter Arsenal. But we're going to do this in reverse order, so I'm going to go from what I believe to be not necessarily a bad detachment, but what I call the worst detachment that we've got. The one that I don't like using. It might not necessarily be the worst detachment, it's just the thing that the detachment that I don't want to really use as often as others. So we're going to start off at number 6, the last one, and it's the Annihilation Legion. Thoughts on the Annihilation Legion? I mean, when I play the Annihilation Legion or when I'm building a list for the Annihilation Legion, I feel quite restricted in what I can take. Of course you can take anything, right? But you want to try and build towards the detachment rule, the enhancements, and of course the stratagems. Now when everything pretty much relates to destroyers, and more so the melee variant of the destroyers, as well as flayed ones as well, you're kind of limited to what's going to be good and what's going to be able to use the rules and abilities. Unfortunately, even though we've got Locust Destroyers and Locust Heavy Destroyers and a Hexmark Destroyer, those 3 units don't really interact as much. They should. They've got the Destroy keyword. Locust Lords as well, in fact, so that's 4 units. Because the detachment rule mainly relates to rerollable charges and so on. Yes, you get a bit of AP firing at the nearest enemy unit, but that kind of stinks really. That's not a great ability. I think it should have had something along the lines of, you know, you get your reroll of your charge roll for melee stuff, and also if you're firing at the closest eligible unit, maybe we should have like sustain hits 2 or something like that. Now of course Locust Heavy Destroyers with the Exterminators already have sustain hits 1, but just put it to 2. So give everything sustain hits 1, and then if it's already got it, put it to 2. That's kind of what I meant. That would make more sense to me. They're meant to be angered, enraged, these destroyers, and having more shots kind of makes sense in theory, in my head anyway. Now in terms of the tactics and the playstyle of the Annihilation Legion, it's quite predictable. So if you're playing your, you know, not tournament stuff, because obviously you can't predict anything in a tournament, but if you're going up in a club scene or just a friendly against your friends and you're bringing the Annihilation Legion, your opponent is going to pretty much know what your game plan is. You're going to have 3 bricks of Scorpic Destroyers with Scorpic Lords. You're going to be going for melee, you're going for the charges, maybe rapid ingress and so on. It's very predictable and your opponent will kind of already halfway know how to deal with you. If they haven't worked it out already, they'll work it out at that point. As soon as you say Annihilation Legion, they're going to be like, okay, I kind of know what you're about. Now we said it already at the start of this section, you can just opt to bring non-destroyer units. You know, you could bring a Doomsday up, you could bring a Catan, you could bring the Silent King. But then you may as well just look at other detachments that relate better to those units. You may as well look at the Star-shatter Arsenal. If you're looking at the Doomsday Ark of the Silent King potentially. Maybe if you're looking at Canoptek Race, you've got the Canoptek Court and so on. You've got other detachments that work better with other units. So again, it kind of restricts you and limits you when you're doing your list building, which kind of bugs me a little bit. Not only that, personally, if I'm taking Scorpet Destroyers, which is the main unit in this detachment, I'd rather field them in the Awakened Dynasty. The +1 to the hit roll at all times is great. Yes, you don't have the rerollable charge roll, but you do have a CP reroll if you want it. If it's desperate. You know, how often in a game does it happen? A few times, I'd say. A few times, but you can use CP for it. And there's other stratagems in that detachment that work probably better. +1 to the strength. You can resurrect your Scorpet Lord and so on. Of course, in the Annihilation Legion, there's loads of stratagems that can help boost your outcomes with your rolls and stuff. But I think they just do work better in the Awakened Dynasty. So yeah, for me, this detachment does have its strengths, but I believe the other 5 are just better. They're superior to the Annihilation Legion. In at number 5, I've gone with the Obeisance Phalanx. It's another detachment that feels slightly restrictive with the units that you're going to take. Yes, you can take any units again, just like the Annihilation Legion. Of course, you can take anything, but with the Obeisance Phalanx, you ideally want to take Triarch units, Lich Guard units, and Nobles. So it's going to limit you on what you want to take for the detachment rule, which is Worthy Foes, the +1 to the wound roll against a selected target, and you're doing that in your command phase. And only those 3 types of keywords gain that buff against that selected target. Now, when the synergy clicks, it really does click with the Silent King involved, and you're giving all sorts of buffs and bonuses. Then the +1s to wound, and maybe you're re-rolling wounds with Immortals and Plasmancers. You know, there's a real good piece of synergy there if you put your brain to it. But your opponent can kind of prepare for it. Like, they can half predict what unit you're going to select for the +1 to the wound roll with the detachment roll. So they can maybe screen it off. Maybe they can just make it a little bit more difficult with stratagems, defensive stratagems that they've got. Maybe they've got a -1 to damage stratagem. Maybe they've got a stratagem that turns on lone operative, and so on. So it's a little bit more predictable in comparison to like the Canoptek Court. The Canoptek Court, you're going to get your re-rolling 1s or re-rolling all your hit rolls in the power matrix at all times against all units. It isn't one particular unit, so it doesn't matter. They can't defend against it as easy. So that's why I would prefer, for example, the Canoptek Court over the Obeisance Phalanx. The main key units within this detachment, one of them being the Silent King, I think he works better in the Star-shatter Arsenal. In fact, he works really well in the Star-shatter Arsenal. He's like the main guy in that detachment nowadays, unless you're going with the Command Barge, but that's another story. So you've got other options. If you take the Silent King, or if you want to field the Silent King, you can investigate different detachments. So there's just kind of better options in my opinion. As for the Nobles within this detachment, they're going to be going with lots of different units. Well, not lots actually. It's going to be Warriors, Immortals, Lich Guard mainly. And those 3 units, again, if you're playing like the Awakened Dynasty, you can attach a Noble or even a Cryptek to get the buffs there. And that's sometimes cheaper. You know, you could just get a Plasmancer, which is cheaper than an Overlord, and so on. So you can be cheaper in other detachments as well. Or go with the Canoptek Court again and just take a Cryptek, again, a Plasmancer. So I just think we've got better detachments. A lot of people do like the Obeisance Phalanx and swear on it that it's the best detachment we've got. And maybe it is in your circles of friends. It might do really well, or maybe you're just a really good player. When you go to tournaments, you absolutely take every millimetre you can out of the detachment, and you're really good. But for me, it hasn't really worked out as well as I would have liked it to, and I think the detachment rule isn't that great. A +1 to wound is nice, but it's against a selected target with very select few units that you've got, which restricts your list building, which we've kind of already mentioned. So yeah, that's the Obeisance Phalanx. That's what I think of it at this moment. Not that many good points, quite a lot of bad points. Let's move on to number 4. Number 4, I've gone with the Canoptek Court. This detachment is not as restrictive as the other two that we've mentioned so far in this video. There's a lot of Canoptek units, there's a lot of Cryptek units or leaders, and once they lead a unit, then the entire unit gains that keyword, so it could be Immortals, Warriors. There's a lot more versatility within this detachment to be able to unlock the Power Matrix ability, but you're rerolling ones or rerolling all the hit rolls within the Power Matrix. What I like about this detachment is it unlocks, the Power Matrix unlocks at the start of the phase, which means you're in total control of it from your movement phase. Because at the start of your movement phase you may not have the Power Matrix open, but you don't need it at that point, you're not rolling to hit at that point. But once you've moved into position onto no man's land objectives, maybe even the enemy deployment zone objective, you're then unlocking it for your start of your shooting phase, which is where your rolls actually start to get affected by the rule. So I quite like the fact that you're in control of it at all times. All the units that you're taking are gonna pretty much have the Canoptek keyword or the Cryptek keyword, apart from a few other ones which are probably there just to do scoring, like maybe Ophidian Destroyers or something, Hexmark Destroyers. They're not there to do the damage, they're there to do the scoring, so it kind of works. Doomstalkers in this detachment are pretty cheap, 145 points for a very good anti-tank vehicle. I mean, they're only damage 3, but in this detachment with the full rerolls in your Power Matrix, with Blast as well and the +1, this D6 +1, you likely get a lot of shots, especially if you've got 3 of them, which you should always be taking in the Canoptek Court. So there's a lot of output for not a lot of points. 145, let's do that quick maths. I haven't got the quick maths in me at the minute. 145 times 3, 435 points, so less than 500 points, quite a lot less in fact. And you're doing a lot of damage, a lot of rerolls, pretty good. So that's the Doomstalkers. You've got the Canoptek Wraiths, of course, which are one of our best units in my opinion for battling out in the no man's land, which is absolutely perfect for this detachment because that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be aggressive in the no man's land because you want the Power Matrix up and running in the no man's land. So not only are the Wraiths much more aggressive because they're re-rolling hit rolls, re-rolling, you know, all that stuff, punching a lot harder than they would say in the Awakened Dynasty because of the full re-rolls, but they're also quite resilient, especially with a Technomancer, so they're sticking around, keeping their OC on deck, holding on to the objectives, scoring VP on the primaries as well, don't forget, and it all just comes hand in hand. Your opponent has got no choice but to try and deal with those Wraiths. They're going to have to spend CP or use precision attacks from somewhere to get rid of the Technomancers. Maybe it's from Epic Challenge, and that's even if they've got the capability of doing that. Maybe they're a shooty unit that can't, or a shooty faction that can't quite do it. You don't have Epic Challenge at range, do you? So it's not that easy to take them out, especially when you've got all the reanimation protocols, the Technomancer's healing ability, a Canoptek Reanimator, maybe there's a Canoptek Spider. That wouldn't apply so much with the Technomancer, I suppose. But yeah, there's so much synergy. You've got good screens with the Canoptek Scarabs that can be brought back with the Spider. And if you want to take a Nightbringer as well, which is pretty good in this detachment, don't forget. Now, the one drawback with the Canoptek Court is you can say it's slightly predictable what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. The playstyle, you know, you've got 3 Doomstalkers. They're going to likely be in your home deployment zone. Maybe they're all together, clumped together with a Reanimator. Maybe they're all separated, but they're going to be around that area. The Canoptek Wraiths are going to be in the no man's land. And then you have bits and bobs that you've chosen, whether it's a Nightbringer, Hexmarks, whatever. You've chosen some extra additional units that go with this detachment, but all in all it's slightly predictive. But again, if you're going into tournaments, then anything goes. There is no predictive. It's just 1 minute you're facing Orcs, then you're playing against Chaos Knights. It is what it is. But as soon as you say the words, I am playing the Canoptek Court, and if your opponent is a good player, they'll know what that means. They're going to know the battle is in the no man's land. So they're instantly thinking, how do I deal with that? How do I relate my secondaries to that if they're playing fixed? What units can I use to get into the no man's land? So they're already forward thinking. So it's semi-predictable, but you can say that about any detachment really. But not as predictable as, say, the Annihilation Legion. Okay, on to number 3. This one is the Hypercrypt Legion. Now this used to be my number 1 detachment before we got all the nerfs in the last year, that was. What I like about this detachment though is virtually any unit works with this detachment. Anything can hyperphase, anything can come back on. It doesn't have to. You can't always deep strike, of course. Some of them have to come on a table edge, but that's fine. They can still hyperphase, and most of the units can use cosmic precision, unless they're the Catan, the monsters. So that's a really good, very useful ability for not only scoring, but maneuverability, board control, and just keeping your opponent on their toes. They're going to have to block and screen deep strikes. If you've got a load of death marks that are popping in, popping out, they're going to have to screen it off, which means they're going to have to spend units and spend resources in screening those areas off. Otherwise, you're just going to score points. So that means there's going to be less units that can come forward into the no man's land, going for the primary objectives. And if you've got other units there in the no man's land, they're going to be more. They're going to have less to do because there's going to be not as much there to compete with. So that's the first and second thing I like about the Hypercrypt Legion. I quite like the fact that you could go fixed with the Hypercrypt Legion and you go with Established Locust and Behind Enemy Lines as a really good combination. It's very easy to score because of Cosmic Precision. Hex marks in particular with Low Knot and Deep Strike, that's a huge factor in this detachment because they've got to get within 12 to shoot him, and if they get within 12 anyway, then you've got a free Overwatch as well, which is quite handy. If you get them behind terrain, then they're not even going to shoot anyway because they've got to get really in and get line of sight of it. So that's another cool thing you can do. Now, one of the main parts of this detachment is a monolith. I don't really tend to use monoliths in this detachment, even though most of the stratagems are based around a monolith. But there are some funky tactics that you can use with a monolith because A, it's got Deep Strike, B, it's got the Eternity Gate, and C, there's a stratagem where you can pull units off into the Eternity Gate and out again if you lose a model. I think that relates to infantry only. So there's lots of funky stuff. Then when you add on Cosmic Precision and maybe it's a Luminous Ares or something, you can really create a castle virtually anywhere on the board, as long as there's space, of course. Now the nerf we got did really hurt because it nerfed how many units we can actually hyperphase, and to be honest it was probably a fair nerf because we were taking 3 off at a time, and especially if they were like vehicles within one phase and you're just popping in cheap Triarch Stalkers or Annihilation Barges or even Doomsday Arcs. I mean, they're not cheap, but Doomsday Arcs are pretty tough and they've got a lot of firepower, and just throwing a Doomsday up the board is an absolute mess for your opponent to deal with. So I think it was warranted for the nerf, but it also meant it wasn't as useful for me personally, so I kind of left it alone. And then not that long later we had the Star-shatter Arsenal, which is kind of where I went towards at that time. But yeah, it's not top anymore, but it's still third and it's still a pretty reasonable detachment for Necron players. In at number 2, I've gone with the Awakened Dynasty. Very close to being number 1, in fact. This is our Index Dynasty. We got this right at the start of the edition. It was actually mega OP at the start of the edition when Necron Warriors were absolute boss. When they had the D3+3 reanimation. And then you had Reanimators giving them double bubble. It was crazy good, and then they absolutely nerfed the Warriors to crap. But the detachment nowadays, 2025, it's still very solid. It's number 2 in my list. We've got a lot of leaders in the Necrons Codex, which can all give the detachment bonus. We've got Nobles, we've got Cryptex, we've got Destroyer Lords. We've even got the enhancement that we, like I said earlier, where we can have an aura where units nearby are being led. They have the benefits of being led, and that could be like a Doomsday Arc. It could be a Canoptek Doomstalker. It could be literally anything as long as it's not a character model. So those units can gain a +1 to the hit roll, gaining command protocols, which I think is pretty powerful, especially when a lot of the units in our book can't actually be led. Now some of the stratagems, well, all the stratagems as a combination are probably the best set of stratagems we've got in our codex. you've got a blend of everything, haven't you? You've got the resurrection of a character, you've got the +1 to the strength and AP and melee, you can reroll your ranged attacks, you've got reanimation to a unit, which is D3+1 as well. You can give assault. There's a lot of good options that relate to all types of different units, whether it's range units, melee units, shield units, Lich Guard with the sword and shields, screens. It's such an open detachment that it really does help virtually any unit you want to use, which is also fun because if you're just playing a friendly fun game which isn't too heavy competitively, you can still make a lot of fun out of the detachment, and you can bring Ghost Arcs and you can bring Annihilation barges, command barges, and still use all the utilities we've got, all the stratagems, the enhancements, and still have a lot of fun but still be semi-good in terms of being, I don't want to say competitive because you're playing friendly, but you know what I mean, you can still do pretty well with this detachment. Also, we've got the Veil of Darkness, which is another nice little fun bonus thing to have. Again, if you're playing friendly, it's really cool. If you're playing competitive, it's useful. It's useful, depends what unit you put it on. But overall, I do like the Awakened Dynasty, especially Locust Destroyers hitting on 2s is nice. Immortals hitting on 2s is nice. We've got options, and Scorpion Destroyers is another one. Scorpion Destroyers, I think they're better in this detachment than the Annihilation Legion. Hitting on 2s, and you've got lethal, you're re-rolling hits. There's so much synergy in this detachment, and I really do like it. Number 1 for me at this moment in time is the Star-shatter Arsenal, our Christmas detachment, which is a all vehicles gain the assault keyword, and if you're firing at units or objectives, you get a +1 to hit roll, and that goes for all Necron units, not just vehicles. Vehicles and mounted, have the assault, which is really key, because all of our vehicles, apart from the big stuff, have invulnerable saves, so they're all pretty resilient, they're all pretty tanky. Now they've all got assault, so that's your Silent King has assault, your Doomsday Arcs have assault, everything having assault. And then of course your mounted stuff, your Tomb Blades have got assault, your Locust Destroyers have assault, your Locust Heavy Destroyers have assault, which means you can move around pretty rapidly, you can get line of sight much easier, especially with your Locust Heavies, because it's quite easy to hide from them. But if you can go, you know what, I'm going to move 8 and I'm also going to advance, bosh, there you go. I mean, we've even got the Chrono Shift stratagem, which is for Necron or vehicles or mounted units. You can basically have a 6 for your advance roll. You don't have to roll for it. So that would be 8 inches plus 6 inches, that's 14 inches, and then you're firing. And that could be, again, your Locust Destroyers with the Gorse Blaster thingamajigs. That's a lot of firepower. Potentially you're going to be having a +1 to hit if you're firing on objectives. You're going to be re-rolling stuff. It's just a very good detachment because of assault and the +1 to hit. It just kind of works with everything, in my opinion. It really does work. Now, one of the key units within this detachment is the Doomsday Arcs. I think the Doomsday Arcs are probably the best unit we've got points in the Codex right now. 200 points for a Doomsday Arc is fantastic, and now you're giving it assault and potentially a +1 to the hit roll. You then take in the Silent King or a Command Barge with the Dread Majesty enhancement. So it's like a mini Silent King, isn't it, when you have that enhancement. You can choose or for re-rolls of hit rolls of 1s and wound rolls of 1s for everything within 6. And if you've got 2 or 3 Doomsday Arcs around it that have all assaulted up the board, all advanced up the board with the Silent King or the Command Barge, and then they've got a +1 to the hit roll, so your 2s, you're hitting on 2s and you're re-rolling 1s. Then you're likely wounded on 2s or 3s, re-rolling 1s. It's devastating, absolutely devastating. And yeah, Doomsday Arcs are definitely in fashion at the moment. They really are. The stratagems are pretty strong. You've got the +1 to the wound roll stratagem. You've got the -1 to wound us stratagem. Both of those are very powerful. Anything that's a +1 or -1 to wound is really good, because the difference, it's not like a +1 to hit. A +1 to wound is much more valuable, because you could be, let's say your strength's 6 and you're firing at toughness, I'm going to say toughness 11. You're firing at a Catan, right? that would normally be 5s to wound. But a +1 to wound instantly turns your strength to strength 11, basically. It's the same thing. It's like having strength 11 all of a sudden. So you've not just gained 1 strength, like some other detachments have with the Awakened Dynasty has a +1 to the strength. A +1 to wound could literally give you like 5 strength, an extra 5 strength. So a +1 to wound, -1 to wound is a huge deal, especially when you're firing against the big stuff or when the big stuff is firing against you. We've also got the stratagem where vehicles can go through terrain, which is nice, going through ruins. They're just phasing through. So the Silent King can just go, you know what, I'm going to ignore that piece of terrain, I'm just going to go straight through it. Because, he's got fly, but fly stinks at the minute. You've got to literally measure diagonally up and then diagonally down. Most of the time you can't make it, because your base has to wholly fit on a ruin if you're going to go up and stay up. If your base overhangs, technically not allowed. Your base is not allowed to overhang any ruins, so if it overhangs you can't go up. Unless you can make it down again, which you can't. You likely can't. I mean, with assaults, and you roll a 6 maybe, you possibly could. But now we've just got 1 TP, and then you just go through it, and then you gain a lot more ground, because you're now going in a straight line through the ruin. Good stuff. We've also got a reactive move as well, don't forget, which I'm just going to go check what the reactive move is, because I forgot this one. If you're a target in your opponent's shooting phase, you can just make a normal move up to D6. D6 isn't the best, but that D6 could put them out of range all of a sudden. I mean, I don't know how that works actually. If you've been targeted and then you move away and now they're out of range, do they get to select a new target? I think they do. I honestly can't remember. Let me know down in the comments down below. I think they get to select a new target. But that could also mess up potential charge moves that they've got going off. Or it could gain you some primaries, because your turn is obviously coming up after their shooting phase and fight phase and so on. Your turn's coming up, and maybe you're not on an objective with a certain unit. Maybe it's a Trike Stalker. All of a sudden you've moved into position ready for your turn 2, turn 3, and you're now going to score some points for 1 CP. So yeah, that's another good stratagem. But all in all, the Star-shatter Arsenal for me is a winner. I sort of go between the two, Star-shatter Arsenal and the Awakened Dynasty. Every now and then I dabble with the Hypercrypt Legion and the Canoptek Court, but the Obeisance Phalanx and the Annihilation Legion, I only do them if I have to do them. If I think, you know what, I should give this another run just to test something out, or we're doing a battle report maybe. But I don't enjoy those two detachments. I don't think they're as fun for me personally. But you'll have to let me know. What detachment do you guys like playing? And if you want to put your 6 in order, do that as well. And yeah, I'll have a look at what you've got down in the comments. So guys, that is it from me today. Bit of a chat discussion with the detachments. But yeah, don't forget to check out the Baron of Dice if you haven't already. Check out all the different dice they've got. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.